Welcome to the webinar on a point of view on digital citizenship essentials. Tonight I've got June Wall, who's going to help me out here as a moderator, because when I've done this before, sometimes it gets fairly hectic when you're trying to do the presentation as well as monitor any questions that come in. So to start off, first of all, just doing some housekeeping, just needing to indicate the disclaimer that the views and opinions are those of myself, and I would advise people that you take those views and you do your own further investigation and research into the particular topic so that you can see how it would apply for you within your particular school environment. And also the limitation is that KB Enterprises does not give permission for any capture or recording or reproduction of the webinar in any format. So let's begin. My digital journey has been an interesting one, and I'm sure that a lot of you will actually identify with some of the tools that I've got there on the right-hand side. I began my teaching career in the era of the Apple II, and I can remember actually doing catalogue cards in a library environment using an Apple IIe with two large floppy disk drives. Then my first mobile phone was something equivalent to about the size of a relay baton. It was fairly heavy. The battery was the biggest thing, and really all it was like a cordless telephone. There were no other wonderful features. Then my first internet connection was a dial-up, and some of you will remember that it made a squeaky noise and it screeched and whatever else, and then you were connected, and about all you could do was be dealing with emails or bulletin boards at that time. My first digital camera was a Canon PowerShot 350. Now if you think about the size of a sandwich and you put that into a lunchbox, that's about the size of that particular tool. And then it went into my first website being created, and then progressing through with Web 2 utilities, and now in a situation of basically having multiple websites, multiple emails, number of domain names, and all of that within a period of sort of 3 decades, I guess, of being involved in education. And many of you will identify that. And we have our parents we need to acknowledge as well, that they have come down that particular pathway. And so for them, dealing with the concepts of digital citizenship in working with or in helping their kids progress through schooling is a fairly challenging environment for them to be in. And for many, they really don't know what is happening in this area. And so the conversations and the discussions have been in recent times, both through media and also through reports that have come into various inquiry committees. Parents are saying that they want schools to take the responsibility here for helping kids to be able to survive in this particular online environment, in particular with the implications and the incidences that have occurred in regard to cyber safety, cyberbullying and so forth. So basically this is where we find ourselves, and this is why I'm very interested in sharing with you about why I think it's important that we as educators start to really look seriously about what are the digital citizenship essentials without getting too caught up in the hype of what's happening. So there are a number of things that have happened here for me, and first of all it's that the online environment is a place where we work and we play. Well, I know that I do. It's also an environment in which our young people regularly engage, either for educational purposes, social connections or recreation. Then we've got this exponential rate of rollout of not only the technology but also the social networking environments which open up those spaces and places where there is that chance that a young person will put information out there that they may actually live to regret. We've got also statistics. Recently, for those of us in Australia, and I know we've got a couple of folk tonight from the USA on board, but recently in Australia we had to fill out our national census, and one of the questions right at the end was actually asking us what type of internet access we had in our homes. When the last census was done, in between 1998 and 2008, they were able to identify that access to the internet at the home had more than quadrupled from 16% back in 1998 to 72% in 2008. Within that environment, there was 65% of those households where there were children in the age bracket of 3 to 4 were accessing the internet. The growth rate then, when they got to 12 to 17-year-olds, was 90% of those households. Those young people in that age bracket were accessing the internet. So we've got a large percentage of young people in a household who are using the internet, and the report is that they're using it to find information for school, send emails, chat online, surf the internet, play games, or access, download music and movies. So this is an environment within which our young people are interacting and engaging, entertaining themselves and also connecting with others and so forth. So we've got an interesting period of time here. We also have in that same period, 31% of people who are aged 5 to 14 had their own mobile phone. In that period of time, again, 3% of the children who accessed the internet reported to have some kind of personal safety or security problems, and the same percentage for mobile phones. In that last point there, all of us would know that we have, particularly through media and current affairs environments, a significant display and demonstration of the cyberbullying, cyberstalking, online grooming, sexting and so forth. The dark side of it all is it's the age group that are experiencing this, and they're starting from a very young age of 5 years old. The flip side, and something that we experienced in Australia recently, was the incident of the collar bomb hoax with the young schoolgirl in Sydney, that on the afternoon of the 3rd of August, someone broke into their house, confronted her, put this collar bomb around her neck, tied her up, attached a note, and the note had a Gmail address. Also, there was a USB stick attached, and what happened there is that within a short space of time, they traced who the author was of those files, and they also traced where that email account had been used. And then on the 16th of August, the perpetrator was arrested in Kentucky, USA. So again, this is a dark side, but it is a real-life example that our young people would have seen and would have become aware of what's happening within our environment. And of course, at the moment, they're indicating that this evidence around this particular case is circumstantial, but it does demonstrate that darker side of what it is to be a digital citizen. The other aspect is that in June this year, the federal government released this report that you see there, the Highwire Act, Cyber Safety and the Young. Now that is a whole community report. It doesn't just deal with schools, it deals with the whole wider community as well. And it has attracted a lot of public attention in regard to who actually needs to take responsibility of this at this particular point in time. To get us into a context then of the educational aspect is that in Australia we have a Melbourne Declaration of Educational Goals, and within that it indicates these particular essential skills that our 21st century learners need to access through the curriculum and through their teaching and learning programs and their educational experience. So what I've done is I've looked at those and said, well, okay, where does the digital citizenship elements sit in that particular environment, and how can we as educators, teachers, teacher librarians, pick up that particular component and integrate that into the work that we do within classroom environments. So to do that, I ended up identifying 5 essential skills. Now I know that there are a number of other lists out there that deal with digital citizenship, but I wanted to contextualise this within particularly an Australian curriculum and say, well, where does it sit for us? These 5 elements, the first being functional skills, communication skills, then being safe, digital literacy, and I've used digital literacy here because we're talking about digital citizenship. I'll expand a bit more on the extent of that a little bit later. And then the last one being collaborative skills. So looking here at Essentials 1 and 2 in the first instance, because both of these to a certain extent sit side by side. The functional skills are what I call the driver's license of being a digital citizen. In fact, it is just not really possible for someone to be a digital citizen if they cannot read, write, listen, view, if they haven't got those core literacy skills in place. So there's basic literacies that need to be there for the person to be able to survive in this environment. There also needs to be the general IT type skills. So we're looking at even typing, being able to use a keyboard or use, the interface of a smartphone or an iPad, but being able to access that. I have to confess that I think in a few years' time we're actually going to look at our hands and see that our thumbs are a little bit bent, because what I find is once you get down to some of those smaller utilities to be able to type, you tend to be working a lot with your thumbs more than anything else, which brings in an aspect here of occupational health and safety. That all has to be looked at as well in being a digital citizen. You have to be looking after your own well-being when you're working in this environment. Now, for some of us in our work environments, we are basically sitting in front of computers, or we are working or interacting with digital tools all the time. Now, that all starts to have an impact when you have, skeletal or muscular problems. You also have to look at, the eyesight aspects, the glare of the screen, the radiation of the screen. All of these things are functional skills, and our young people need to be made aware of them, in the sense that they need to know that they need to have some responsibility here for how they manage that occupational health safety environment for themselves, as well as for the schools, and how they take responsibility and act on due diligence in that aspect too. Then there's the IT facility, or the IT component, where students have to be aware of how they manage their information, even just naming of files and those particular protocols, creating folders where they're stored, whether it's in a cloud computing environment or whether it's on a USB stick or wherever it might be. These are basic functional skills that students need to have in the first instance to be an effective digital citizen. And I've got an extra reading there that you might want to look at, which is the 10 skills every student should learn. And what the editor did of eSchools was survey the readers and say, well, what do you think are the essential skills that students need? So that's an extra bit of reading for you. Then we move on to the communication skills. And here this is dealing with the personal aspect, not the collaborative environment. But the communication skills here, that the students need to learn how to have a level of self-respect and to act in a dignified way, to be true to themselves and true to the environment, to make sure that not only can they engage and apply their literacy skills, because they need to be able to effectively write and construct all those sorts of things in that environment. And we've seen incidences where people have engaged their mouth before they've engaged their brain, particularly in social networking environments. So it's important for us to be aware that communication skills are essential, in that we want to bring into that the point that they need to think about what they're doing before they actually communicate in any particular environment. There's a new problem that's being referred to, and that is continuous partial attention. And I'm sure that that's even happening tonight, because what they're saying is in this digital environment we are not actually able to look at the verbal cues. So all you're hearing tonight is my voice, and you're seeing things on a screen. You're not actually seeing me and my eye actions, my waving around of my hands, and I can assure you that I am doing that even though I'm sitting here and myself talking to a computer screen. But they're saying that the students that we have today are actually going to be severely disadvantaged because they are not learning the non-verbal cues. And in the article that was in the Wall Street Journal, and you might want to be interested in looking at that, is basically saying that these young people are actually going to end up doing a disservice to their community or their country or their organisation, because they will not be able to know how to communicate in an environment where there's not verbal cues necessary to be able to progress whatever information they want or be able to share that. So we've got an issue there in how we deal with developing communication skills in a digital environment and making sure that there's a holistic approach for our young people. Then when we go to the next essentials, and this one is important as it is for others as well, is being safe. And in this case, we've got a lot of things happening that I referred to before that parents in particular are asking about the cyber safety element. There are a number of environments where cyber safety material is available. There's the Australian Communications and Media Authority. Most of the state education systems also have information available for teachers and parents and students to access. And we need to use those and integrate those into the work that we do within a school environment. The other thing is helping kids to understand what it is about their personal rights and what they need to do to make sure that they are aware of how they need to protect themselves within the environment within which they work or play or socialise, and to then know that, okay, they might have rights, but with those rights must also come responsibilities. And the responsibilities are that they need to be respectful of others, they need to respect the information that they find, they need to make sure that they do not provide information that could be detrimental to them and expose them to an unsafe situation. And the other aspect is too, the responsibility that we have in due diligence is making them aware that there are terms and references. Now, I'm really surprised at when I read the report from the Joint Committee that there are students who are actually under the age of 13 who have Facebook accounts. So somewhere along the line, they have actually not respected their rights and responsibilities by putting in a date that is incorrect. And that has legal implications. So these aspects need to be taught to the students, but in the context of when they're working in those particular environments. Essential 4, to a certain extent, in some discussions I've had with people, they've said that digital literacy is part of this whole process anyway. And this is where I'm saying the contextualisation or the integration needs to happen, that we're looking at information literacy and how that is integrated into the curriculum. We're looking at critical creative thinking, problem solving, solution creation, higher order. All of that is part of this digital literacy element, and we can be using the teaching of the cyber safety as part of that in that particular environment. Now, I've just put the Wikipedia link there, and that's because I think to a certain extent, somewhere along the line, we will need to be able to give a general definition of this for people to understand what we mean by digital literacy in the context of a digital citizen. And the Wikipedia basically indicates that it is the ability to locate, organise, understand, evaluate and analyse information using digital technology. And so that's their definition, and they place that within the construct of it being a digital environment using digital technology to be able to use that, and we can see there elements of information literacy quite prominent through that process. And we're also seeing where the research elements where they're learning how to effectively use and find, summarise, evaluate, contribute and so forth, create, communicate. So all that is happening in that particular environment. Then the final one that I have is the collaboration skills. And really what we're doing here is we're asking the students to extend their self, extend the personal and private rights and responsibilities they have into an environment where they are working with other people, where they're sharing information with others. So as they exercise that respect and that dignity and that integrity, they must also learn how to do that with others when they're sharing information, when they're creating collaboratively together, in the particular environments where they can do that, wikis and so forth. You know, they need to also be aware that this collaborative environment allows them to build their understanding together. Participation, working with others, fairly essential, and I don't think really there's anything there that's outside of the box in regard to collaborative skills. As I indicated before, there are other locations where you can go to find out other perspectives and other lists. The 9 themes of digital citizenship goes into elements such as commerce and law and legality. Now that's okay, but I think really if we're looking at digital citizenship essentials from the foundation, elementary, preschool, 5 years of age through to our secondary high school students, we need to be looking at something that can be actually applied across that whole range of learners. What recently I've seen is the Scoop It, which is a curator-based site whereby you can capture blogs, tweets, videos, news reports, a whole lot. And this one here on digital citizenship in schools has recently been started by Judy O'Connell. So that's an interesting one to go in because it captures a whole worldwide global perspective of what this discussion is around the particular topic of digital citizenship. What I'm wanting to do now is go into the actual curriculum connection. The context that I'm using here is the Australian national curriculum, but I'm sure that as you look at this, you will be able to see that the words that are here, particularly the ones that I've put in bold, are words that will resonate with you regardless of what country you're in. From the background of coming from education, from school libraries, these are terms that have been utilised for decades and are common to all people who work within that environment, and also to classroom teachers who have engaged with the development of the curriculum and engaged with the people who are that mix on the staff to assist them, whether it be IT people, whether it be school librarians, teacher librarians. These are words which basically are not out of the box. They're words that link in with that whole information-seeking behaviour, information skill development, and also IT skill development as well. So what we can see here in these areas of the general capabilities, which are across the curriculum, across every learning area, we can see here that some of those essential elements that I indicated, the 5 essential skills, are even evident here. For example, if you look at, operate ICT, that is really looking at that functional skill component of being able to apply that technical knowledge to know how to manage the data. The bottom one there about social and ethical protocols is dealing about being safe. And then the ones above that, investigate, create, communicate, they link in with the communication skills, and in the top 2 link in a fair amount with the digital literacy. So we should be able to see ourselves, and that's probably one of the most crucial things about the connection with the curriculum, is as educators to be able to see ourselves within the documentation, whether it be at a national level or whether it be at a state level or whether it be at a district level. Whatever is happening, we need to be able to make those connections, and the reason being is that we use that as a mechanism or a means to be able to get into conversation either with teachers or other resource people who are at the school, or even with the administration and the principal. So that's the first element where I see there's a strong connection with these basic essential digital citizenship skills. The next one is in the critical and creative thinking area. Again, by looking at some of the bold terms there, and this is the interesting thing with the inquiry aspect that you see, inquiring, identifying, exploring and clarifying information. Within the national curriculum being developed here in Australia, inquiry-based learning is quite prominent throughout the 4 areas that have been developed to this stage. And again, we will be able to see ourselves in that aspect of the curriculum and know what it is to engage our students in that particular process. The other elements there, again, are looking at connecting with the digital literacy, connecting with the communication, connecting with the collaboration, and getting students to engage with that those resources to develop rich questions, to look at the information they gather, to analyse and synthesise, to recreate, to repackage, to reconstruct, and then to look at that reflection on their particular journey. So these are important for us to see these in this particular contents. What I want to do, and I haven't actually done this on a webinar before, so this is going to be interesting, is I'm actually going to go and pick up the Australian curriculum from the Australian curriculum website. And I've got us in the history curriculum area. And this is where we need to start to become familiar with the way this is developing and how we can connect into this particular curriculum. Here I've got the Year 5, and as you see on the left-hand side, little bits here just to make it a bit lively. Here we go. This is our content. And this is the concerning thing that I have with this curriculum. It is very content-rich and it's process-poor. But it does have the pathways to connect in to be able to pursue here key inquiry type questions. Now, admittedly, looking at these, there is a mix there of just questions that people will use to cut and paste, which is a bit of a concern, but then there's elements there which allow the why questions to come in and to help guide students into a deeper level of thinking. The area that I'm wanting us to look at is here down in the historical skills. What this ability you have here is that you can actually say, look here, it says historical questions and research, and you can click on the little magnifying glass to open it up to look at the elements that are going to be used to go in deeper into this particular Year 5 content area. So here it's identifying questions to inform an historical inquiry. Now, the school library profession should be able to see themselves in this curriculum through that particular pathway. The same with identify and locate a range of relevant sources. Now, that's not only just dealing with what the students may engage in, it's also then how we support the teachers. And if you look at the content is the colonial Australia of the 1980s. So that's one. And then if I'll just close that and analyse and use of sources, again, we see here words that will resonate with us as an educator and as people in the profession in school libraries to look at that particular element. Locate information related to inquiry questions in a range of sources. Now what I'm going to do, how am I going for time? Plenty of time. What I'm going to do is go down further and look at, say, the Year 10 to see the level of development that is being anticipated. So if I just scroll down here, okay, Year 10. So Year 10, a different content area, different questions being asked in the key inquiry, and then we've got the skills element here. So if I go to the historical questions and research and open that up, we see that there are similar questions or similar elements that were asked in the Year 7, but there's also another layer there, and the other layer is evaluate and enhance these questions. So at a Year 10, the curriculum is indicating that we want kids to actually start to develop some higher level thinking here and go beyond the very simple questions, but look at how they create more complex questions, verging on close to elements of hypotheses, all those sorts of things. So the curriculum is designed in a way that is a developmental sequential. What we see here, though, is not a lot of depth, but it does provide the opportunity then to look at how you would develop that and expand that to incorporate what it is that you wish to offer to your school through the services that are being offered through a school library environment, or even through an IT environment, or other areas where there is input into the curriculum from specialist areas of personnel. The other aspect is it does give a achievement statement, and there's a full description there, but it also gives work samples. So for teachers coming in here, they can see some of the evidence of work that a student would produce at this particular level, having engaged in those historical skills. Now, it is possible within a school environment to also provide some level of resources there as well, particularly when working in relationships that you have as a team working with the teachers. You can actually say, well, here's some sample of work that we've produced from our own school, from the students of our school. This is what they are capable of doing. It creates a very rich resource to demonstrate the attainment of the particular skills that students will develop during this time. I'd encourage you, particularly the Australian folk on board, to have a look at this environment, because it does allow you, now I'm not quite sure, June, can we see the top there where it says the filters, the strands, the general capabilities?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What you're able to do here is, through the drop-down menu, you can look specifically at other capabilities that are there. So if, for you, you have a strong interest in literacy, and maybe less so in the information technology, you can basically select literacy and then apply that filter, and what will happen is the system will then open those up in the historical skills section. So instead of just being like here, the historical questions and research, pose questions about the past using sources provided, and this is at a foundational level. So you're able to use the navigation bars at the top. You can look at certain specifically year levels rather than all of them. If you're wanting to look at particular strands in historical, you can do that as well. Now, each of the curriculum areas that are developed have this facility now. And the intent of the people who are developing this, of the Australian Curriculum Authority and Research and Assessment, they are going to continue to make this a very rich environment for educators to work in. And it's important for us to see how that is developing and be able to make that connection for our staff at our schools of how to use that effectively as well. And I'm just going to do a bit of a recap and then open up to questions. And if need be, we'll go back into some of these environments. So to recap, starting right from the Melbourne Declaration, where it states as a really broad brush stroke of what skills, 21st century learning skills, the Australian nation is looking at developing, and then looking at how we can connect with those so that it becomes an element that we feel that we're a part of. Is one pathway is through this digital citizenship process, whereby we can contribute to the learning and development of functional skills for students, from learning how to manage their environments to using particular tools and digital gadgets and whatever else, as well as develop those core literacy capabilities. And then through the communication skills of how to be effective in their communication, of once they've got those basic skills, how to then to construct their paragraphs, their sentences, their short components if they're just doing micro communication. All those elements are there, and how to take responsibility for what they're actually putting out there in their communication. Being safe, looking at the cyber safety, looking at being able to work in that environment and know what is the digital impact of their footprint and the longevity of that. There's like a long tail to that. They might, as an adolescent or a young person, put information out there onto Facebook or Twitter or other environments, but it's going to be around for a long time. So there's the longevity element that's in there. Then there's the digital literacy, incorporating a whole range of areas that are very common to the school library environment, as well as bringing in the people who have those ICT specialisations as well, and then the collaborative skills. And this is where it is extremely constructive for young people, because they're used to working in these type of environments where they do tend to work together. I mean, in our day, we would have called it cheating, but today it's not cheating. It's actually exercising their collaborative skills in that process. So, June, I've gone at a bit of a galloping pace there, but if you have been able to capture any questions as we've gone, or at this point if people want to enter in some questions.
Yes, it would be great if people could put in some questions into the question pane. I've got a question about the Australian curriculum site itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a participant asking about what the time frame for the development of the curriculum and the web interface was.
Well, the consultation processes for the Australian curriculum have been around for a couple of years, and at each point there has been public notice of contributing to that. But for the areas of English, maths, science and history, they've actually had stakeholders from the respective professional associations involved in that, looking at developing that content and that particular learning area. Where they've begun to bring in people who are in the field of school libraries, even ICT people, is in the development of the general capabilities. Now, the general capabilities has just finished a consultation process, and there will be a revised version of that put out in November, which means it's not, that isn't, what can I say, it's not set in concrete for the general capabilities. And that particular interface, that site that's there, will continue to evolve and grow. But what we probably can say is that the content of those 4 learning areas is pretty well set in concrete at this point in time.
You might like to articulate further, Karen, about the role that teacher librarians played in the development of the national curriculum and capabilities?
I don't think there was a lot of involvement in regard to the development of the content of the curriculum. When the first round of consultation took place, from school libraries, the main input was to make sure that whatever content was being developed, there was a parallel element being involved there of how you would actually look at the elements of information literacy. And in fact, very strongly right from the start, if I draw from the material that has been available on the Australian School Library Association site, where the submissions that have been put in by that particular association, there was this constant message being sent to the curriculum authority developing this, that information literacy really needed to be evident across the curriculum, it needed to be a part of the curriculum, and that has then progressed, that when the general capabilities consultation process came out, there was an opportunity there for anyone to actually register on the site and make a contribution to that. The Australian School Library Association, on behalf of the profession, did make a contribution to that, went out to its own consultation, and unfortunately I have to say there wasn't a lot of input from the wider community, and so there was a core team that responded to that. Again, continuing that message quite clearly that certain terminologies need to be made more contemporary, and that information literacy, digital literacy, all these elements, critical creative thinking, have a connection with what the profession does within the Australian community.
Karen, would you like to make a comment on how, there's another question, how the 5 elements of digital citizenship you see could be integrated within what teachers do in the classroom now?
To a certain extent, I think that the teachers themselves have to be aware of their own digital citizenship to be able to connect with these. And I know that in certain communities, certain school communities, that there are a percentage of people within that school community who don't actually have some of those core functional skills down pat. So I think we've got some challenges here, and it goes back to what I said before, right at the start, that there's this exponential rate that technology is basically being absorbed into our society and being taken up by people. And for some, there are generations that just cannot deal with this exponential rate. So for teachers, there is that element of functional skill development. I think most teachers would have reasonable communication skills. I would also think that all of these digital essential elements, digital citizenship elements, would be evident, but there are areas where I can see that the importance of having someone on staff who can provide that either formal or informal professional learning in helping the staff to develop some of these skills to then be able to support their students is fairly crucial. Don't know whether I answered that question, but I guess the people can, key in some things there to say if they don't think I've answered that, or they've got another question in relation to that.
Another question is, what would be for the teachers online tonight and the teacher librarians online tonight, what are your core points that you think that they need to focus on?
Well, first of all, I think I'm going to give you three. One, I think, first up, is that each person has to identify what elements of digital citizenship that you want to address in your school. Now, you don't need to be picking up the ones that I've got. You might go and have a look at the 9 elements of digital citizenship. You might feel that that's more comfortable. But what you have to do, I believe, is first of all identify what elements that you want to address in your school. You know your school community, you know where their weaknesses are, you know where their strengths are, and of course really you want to balance those two out within the particular environment we're in. Then I would say map across the general capabilities wherever again you feel that you have an expertise, you have confidence, you know your area, you're knowledgeable in that particular area. And it might be that, as I said before, ICT and critical creative thinking may not really float your boat, so literacy may be it. Or you might be more into the ethical behaviour values, even though the ethical behaviour one tends to be more on ethics. But pick up a general capability that you think that you can actually start to map, and then look at basically picking up one area of the curriculum where you can look at how that applies, particularly in a developmental sequential way from the beginning of elementary or primary school, preschool, through to your year 7, or if you're in a high school, from where you would get your feeder students coming in and taking it through to your secondary or senior school years. So look at how you can map that and then test it a bit to see how that would be accepted or take shape. And the way you would do that would be to work with people within your school with whom you already work and who are interested in exploring how this curriculum will develop, how your digital citizenship or how the digital citizenship components can be part of the school community. Because the interesting thing is that when they did the survey, they asked that the committee did a survey of students, and there were 33,751 who completed the survey, and they said that response to a question, what can be done to make the online environment safe? 24% of the students, starting from year 5 through to year 7, from 5 years of age, to 17 years of age, said that learning about it at school was very important. Then they said talk more to family about it. But all the way through in the survey results, the students were constantly indicating that first of all they learn about cyber safety at school, 42% said that. And then when it comes to making an online environment safe, again, these students saw that the school is the place to learn that. With both those statistics there kind of ringing in my ears, there is some level of duty of care to our young people that we make every effort to make sure that they do learn those core essential skills of what it is to be a digital citizen.
Thank you, Karen. At this stage, we don't have any other questions. Your answers have actually covered the ones we've got.
My closing comments would be that this is just the beginning of a journey, I think, for not only the schools and particularly the states and territories of Australia, because those of us in Australia would know that there has been a certain level of resistance to this national curriculum, and some states have said, well, we're not going to start looking at implementing this until 2014, and others have now said, well, yes, maybe this is all going too fast. And if that's the case, I guess the main thing is that as one professional group representing the teaching community within Australia is for the teacher librarians to put a finger on the pulse of this and to monitor it, and wherever the doorway is open to make a contribution, particularly within the school, to be on any planning committees, any implementation committees, any curriculum designing and development committees. It would be really great if you would, be involved at that level, because I see this whole process continuing to evolve over a period of time as people come to terms with trying to let go of a previous culture of being, I guess, parochial to the state's curriculum, but then also being conscious of the fact that in Australia our community or our people are very mobile, and people travel and work and move in between states, and the core concept of a national curriculum is to allow a student to also have that transition into another state system without being deprived of lacking in content or having to step a year back, or all those sorts of things that currently happen. So really it would be great if people could see that what is developing at this national level isn't something that is frightening, isn't scary, it isn't something that's out of the box. There are terms and there are phrases and there are processes there where we can certainly see ourselves, and we need to engage in that at that particular level. A couple of other points before I move to the end and close. What I see that can go wrong with all of this is that people will tend to build or tend to want to keep the silos in schools. The IT department will want to have their little silo. Even the school library will want to have its little silo and put a little, well, this is the information literacy tag we put on here. The content people will also have a little silo. And really I would consider that that is an old paradigm of educational structures, that we need to look at how this can be intermingled, interspersed, integrated, where you are actually engaging people at different levels and different teams to bring together those specialist skills to be able to develop exciting and engaging programs for students. Because they did the eSchools did a survey of students to find out what they wanted, and some of the aspects that they raised was that they wanted their learning to be more innovative, and they wanted the teacher to be more of a mentor. So if you wanted to follow that link before that I had that had the eSchools on the 10 skills that students need, if you go to that particular site, the eSchools news site, you will see that there's another report there about what students want. And that's what they're saying they want. They want that innovation. They want real-life applications to what they're learning. They want teachers to be mentors. It's quite interesting reading that. And I think we are seeing that the way that students are learning and the way that they're gathering their information, the way that they're developing their knowledge is not totally confined to being in a school building and classroom, that their learning is taking shape all around them in the way that they're using the technology to do that blend of education, social connection and recreation. We can see this as an exciting time, or we can see it as an absolutely frightening time, because it can be extremely overwhelming. And that's why I said before, 3 things is identify what elements of digital citizenship you can feel comfortable with, map those into the across the curriculum skill development of either literacy, ICT, critical creative thinking, whatever is there, and then look at how you connect that with the content within the curriculum. Even your state curriculum that you have now, you should be able to see yourself in that particular environment and be involved in some of that development. So thank you, June, for your assistance, because it did make it a lot easier having someone looking at the questions while I was presenting, so thanks for that. And hopefully we'll see you online soon again for another webinar.